Good. So first panel of the day, and we always like to start aerial cities with a panel about what has changed from last year, what are the new trends, what are the new opportunities that we see from the last year, and we always like to do that involving all the different governance layers that typically are involved in this, from the state to the regions to the city. So we collected a great panel set up with us. I'm, of course, Lorenzo Murzilli. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Murzilli Consulting and also co-founder of the conference. And before we start with all the interesting discussions and questions, I would like everybody please to introduce yourselves, and you will have your slide showing up as well. So please, Denise, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm Denise Braemer. I am project lead of an Interreg Baltic Sea region project at Hamburg Aviation. We're the aerospace cluster for the metropolitan region of Hamburg, representing 300 companies, other associations, universities, just anything having to do with the aviation ecosystem, including urban air mobility. We represent at Hamburg Aviation.
Excellent. Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sunil Budhdeo, Transport Innovation Manager for Coventry City Council. Very new to the, when I say new, 4 years old, into the urban air mobility. But as a very active City Council officer, we're learning very fast on how we can deploy the urban air mobility within. And we're creating a regulatory framework in partnership with DICIT and the Midlands Aerospace Alliance. The QR code is there, and at the moment you're able to download a draft version of that particular regulatory framework, and the discussions further will actually explain why we need that, and we need the input from the audience here today.
Thank you so much. Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Curran. I'm the head of the Survey and Mapping Division in Dublin City Council, which also now includes our corporate drone unit, which was created this year as part of our drone strategy. We've been using drones and survey and mapping for the last 7 or 8 years, primarily for surveying purposes, obviously, but the demand has grown within the organisation, and we now do work for dangerous buildings, for engineers in flood defence, in pretty much every area of council work. Part of the reason I think I'm here is we want to promote our drone strategy and our drone innovation programme, which was launched recently with the Irish Aviation Authority and Maynooth University. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ewa, please.
Hi, I'm Ewa. I'm head of SARG Operations and Programmes. I've given you a bit of a snapshot of what the CEA does, because we do a vast array of different things in commercial air transport, as well as drones and air mobility that we're talking about today. Our core mission is protecting people and enabling airspace. And they're the 3 state safety obligations that we have to adhere to on that at the bottom of the slide. And just a brief snapshot, we have made lots of progress in the last 12 months. Tangible progress from a PDRA01 tool that launched earlier this year, atypical and detect and avoid policies that are live and being used by people at the moment, ACOMS, airspace navigation, etc. And we've got also future activity going on. So our Law Commission consultation going on, looking for the future, hydrogen work, and eVTOL consultations.
Thank you very much. Please, José.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Javier Rodríguez. I am head of Deputy Director of Traffic Management. I'm in terrestrial traffic management in Madrid. And I'm head of the study group on aerial operations in the commission that Madrid City Council has created in order to study all these things. This first slide, this is what are the operations today. There are a small number of operations, very line of sight. If you compare to terrestrial mobility, this is a drop in the ocean. So we think that we are looking for planning deployment on air mobility in a bigger scale. That's why we are very interested in knowing business cases that are interesting for different companies. The first thing is we want is to define a realistic roadmap. We know that we need at least 2 years to adapt our local regulations. So we need to start 2 years before the deployment of any project. So it's very important to contact us in advance if you are planning to deploy something in Madrid in order to arrange some regulations. I can give you some examples on other topics. We think we have a new role of cities. We all have to learn to cooperate with regulations that are basically at the national level. Most of them are at the national level. We have a new role for cities. We don't know for certain what the role we should have. So we have to find out between all the parts to know what's the better arrangement in these things. We have a lot of open questions. Probably we'll see in the next presentations. We have to develop a new ecosystem in order to get the most of this new opportunity. Not only transport, the payloads, the business cases, all are important to work together to have. And the social acceptance is the key thing, the key idea. Probably the citizens are eager to accept a lot of things, but if they are useful for them, if they have more benefits than costs, so we can manage this. I can give you some examples of projects that went good and some projects that went bad. So to give you an idea that the social acceptance may be the key point to develop all this business. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I mean, in this panel that we do, by the way, every year, I always like to start with a question kind of for everyone, which is kind of like the progress since last year. Like you have been involved in different capacities, you know, from city again to region to government, and you are aware like what happened last year. So I would like to ask everybody of you, like reflecting on this last year, what would you say is the most defining progress element that you have observed as far as, you know, enabling aerial cities and enabling these trends that you were discussing about? Like, how are you transforming these 2,000 flights into 200,000 flights or more? So what would be the most important step? Please, Denise, we can start again from you.
Thank you. So in our role as Hamburg Aviation, we really do kind of we get a broad view of what's going on in Hamburg from the governmental perspective, the industry perspective, and a lot of the research projects that we have going on urban air mobility. We have a number of new projects that have kicked off, including one on U-Space, establishing the first U-Space. And we have also had our first drone port has been opened this June. The Hamburg Port Authority has opened a first fixed landing site in Hamburg, includes all the ground infrastructure, communications infrastructure, and control center. So that, I think, was a big change for us to have sort of an on-site area where drones can be stored, charged, and controlled from a central site. Its aim is, you know, what they would like to have other authorities also fly their drones there, use it as sort of a test space. It's near the water, it's in the port, so it's a little bit easier to fly. It's still in the controlled airspace because 90% of Hamburg is in controlled airspace. We have 2 airports, so that's still challenging. But we're also flying quite a few more demonstration flights, not regular operations yet, but through this project that I'm also helping lead this year, we're doing quite a few more demonstration flights, getting the flights more visible, getting the public familiar with what we're doing.
Excellent. So we can say in Hamburg you have a drone port now. It's established and it's working. That's a milestone step.
Yes,
that's for sure. That's interesting. What about you, Sunil?
Exactly. Is Coventry City Council was one of the world's first city that demonstrated the vertiport in an urban environment, and from the learning from that, which was funded by Innovate UK. We, as a city, weren't aware of what urban air mobility means because, as a council, we're only dealing with roads, rails, and trains like that. This as a new mode of transport, we weren't aware 2 years ago. Once we were able to engage the public and ourselves as to what the possibilities are. So in the last year, in answer to your questions, what we've done in the last couple of years is actually take it back from the vertiport to what we can do today without the vertiport. What can the drones, because drone technology is available, the operations of drones is there. People use it for, as Madrid explained, for leisure facilities and things like that. What we wanted to bring it is to how can it help the local authorities in the current climate to deliver some of those key targets of inspections, monitoring, helping the NHS, the police, the emergency services. So we've started to actually use drones to do things like surveys, bridge inspections, highways inspections, and how that acceptance for the general public is going to be taken and what the benefits would be. because we know that eventually we will have passenger carrying drones, but the introduction of drones in a city is a bigger challenge. The public acceptance is a bigger challenge. Regulations are a bigger challenge. So funding from DCIT has helped us to develop this regulatory framework, which we can then actually share with other local authorities and other cities to say, well, because then it becomes a common framework that can be shared and be used for those cities that are not ready or not engaged with it. So that's our challenge, but we are progressing really well with it. And with part of DCIT and part of the drone-ready cities, we've engaged literally in the last 3 weeks with over 60 local authorities in UK who are interested in us explaining to them how their cities can be.
Excellent. So we can summarize saying you learned how to use drones as a city.
Absolutely.
And you even went further than that and say we even created a framework that we can share with others.
Absolutely.
So if any other cities around that wants to know, like I'm sure we would be happy to share at least your learning and your share.
Absolutely. And
Excellent.
Part of our role is to go out to anywhere. I was in Greece last week doing exactly the same, to say to them, this is what you need to do if you want to be drone ready.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Tom, please.
Our big news from Dublin is the launch of our drone innovation partnership. As I mentioned, we're doing a lot of work now with Maynooth University, the Irish Aviation Authority. We're looking at different aspects of drone use within the city centre. So we're looking at use space, the potential use of use space. We do that by engaging with all bodies, with public bodies, corporate bodies, commercial bodies, everybody essentially through Dublin City Council. We also look at the practical aspects of it. We're looking at a potential drone in the box service, which would be a shared service with search and rescue, Dublin Fire Brigade, potentially the Guards, the police force, or other government agencies that might need that. We also have in Dublin, we have the Dublin area, we've 2 drone delivery companies who are operating in the area, and I know both are looking to expand. I know Bobby's here from Mana, so I don't want to, so I don't know if he's going to announce anything. But the one thing with that, like when I know the areas they're looking to expand to, I suppose our issue is they're not looking to do the city centre area. And we look, well, why is that? It's an obvious reason. There's nowhere for them to actually physically drop. So what we need to look at now is, from a planning point of view, why is there no drone delivery areas on the top of a building? There's commercial interest there. There's obviously solar panels. There's antenna. That there is commercial interest there. So how do we get developers to include something like that? Or not necessarily the roof. What about in an apartment complex, a drone delivery area that could be centralised within a green space or something like that? As it currently stands, there's no mention of drones within Irish planning regulations, none whatsoever. And when you consider how crucial and how important drone technology, be it delivery, be it other commercial enterprise, be it emergency response like defibrillator, medical deliveries, or eventually eVTOL, that has to be incorporated into our planning regulation. So that's something we push for, because we obviously have planners within our organisation. They are talking to the government bodies on a regular basis. We want to take the opportunity to push for the drone side of it. And the fact that we're using drones day in, day out means it's not just planners, I don't want to say making it up as they go along, but they have the knowledge from people who are using it practically. So that's our next step.
That's excellent. So if I want to summarize, you're saying we have engaged pretty much everybody. I know you in Dublin are very famous for that, above and below, everyone. You have some prominent, of course, operators that put a lot of pressure on you. And I mean, you're learning almost like what we need to change as a city, planning from those experiences. So it's not anymore we think about this, but we know about it. It's not anymore about you thinking.
We have to engage.
You know what is happening.
This is not something that's happening in the future.
Yeah, it's happening now.
Happening today.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you so much. What about you, Eva?
I'd say we're most proud of probably moving the industry forward. So we've got lots of small successes that over the last 12 months that are helping to propel the industry forwards, be that the detect and avoid policy concept paper that we've published, the atypical policy concept paper, and these regulatory changes are allowing the industry to fly in different and new ways than they were before and making it more accessible. So people may have been aware of them before, but we're trying to publicise how can you take advantage of existing airspace regulations to help to scale things forward. So mainly regulatory changes that we're introducing, as well as looking at our whole infrastructure. So we've got a big project, which I'm sure a lot of you will have been aware of, that we've been working on for the last 2 years, which is to digitise our application processes, make it easier for industry to actually be able to apply and use the regulations. The first step of that was the predefined risk assessment that went live earlier this year, and that's taken a 13-day process, which was quite clunky and cumbersome and a bit of ambiguity in it, to actually be self-declarative and move that from 13 days to sort of an average 30 minutes just to process an application, which makes industry's life a lot easier and ours as well. So kind of moving the dial in a digital age, really. The next phase of that, which we're busy working on, will introduce additional remote pilot competency frameworks, flight assessment entities to prove the platform integrity to allow us to adopt the SORA methodology. And that will go live early next year. So a lot of our focus is towards that and the practical application of it. And moving all of these things forwards in different areas has allowed APN and the NHS and Wing trial to go ahead at the moment, they're hopefully flying today, to deliver pathology samples between 2 hospitals in the City of London, just down the river, actually. So that's a real achievement for us to be able to see real tangible progress unlocking the city moving forwards.
Thank you. Javier.
In Madrid, the biggest change I have seen the last year is the political support to this kind of projects. If we were in 2023, we are using drones with drone operations in the city council and also in the city. But this topic was under the radar. Nobody spoke about that. The difference is that now we have a political mandate from the city mayor with the commission. We have several study groups, regulation, environment, operations, infrastructure, environment, acceptance, economic use cases. Because we need to understand what the needs of the sector. For us, this is a completely new sector. We are not used to regulate air. We don't know the business cases. We don't know what kind of infrastructure you are going to need, what kind of services you want to deploy, because every different has its own personality. So probably not all the services will be in all the cities. So we have an open process now to speak with all the stakeholders in the market to understand what do they need from the city, what we can do for them, not overlapping with other regulators, because air regulation, the traditional air regulators, they have a very concrete responsibility, and they are developing regulations on drones or the airspace, or they are doing their job. And now we have to find out what's our position, what's our responsibility in the city. And we have to understand from the industry what they need to do to build an ecosystem to develop this kind of business.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, political support, I think it's key, I guess, and the fact that you start to have it, I guess, is very important to make progress. One of the things that I noticed, and I'm going to ask you, Ewa, like I noticed that cities are becoming more aware, right, of operations. They're making their learnings from real cases, and they are even like creating regulation to some extent that would allow operation in certain ways. Like, so from your perspective as the CAA, like traditionally we know the airspace has always been regulated by at national level. You know the topic. This has always been a thing, but like what you can see that operations are moving more and more into cities. And it seems to me that there is a need for more collaboration between like the different layers, so from the government all the way to the city itself. What is it that you are doing specifically to either enable this collaboration, or are there initiatives that are going on? How would you describe the situation right now in the UK?
Yeah, so interesting question. earlier in the year, we published the Future Flight Action Plan, which was with a number of different people who are here today, between industry, the different areas of government, and the DFT sponsoring that kind of program of work. Unfortunately, because of the general election that happened, that kind of had to go on pause. We're now seeing if we can reinvigorate that program of work together, but it's very much an ecosystem where we all have to work together, be that industry, be that regulation. If you look at the NHS trials that I just spoke about, that's working with the clinical regulators as well. So it's not just the aviation regulators that have to be involved. There's lots of different policies. And if you look at fire and safety, local councils, everybody has to be involved to make it work. You can't just have one person push forwards, you all have to be moving forwards at the same pace, or else you'll fall at different hurdles. So very much trying to re-encourage that, what we had before in the Future of Flight Industry Group, to move forwards and hopefully be reinvigorated soon under the new ministerial government, would be what we're trying to work towards with the Department for Transport.
Thanks. And Sunil, I have a question for you, because we are on regulation. You mentioned that you have been developing a regulatory framework. That, to me, it's a pretty unique thing. So I'm very curious, honestly. What have been your challenges? What's in there? Why do you need to do something like that? And what are you trying to address with it?
The biggest issue is, as Madrid mentioned earlier, the rogue operators. Where is the rogue operators? They're still doing it. They're still carrying out the flights. But for a local authority, if there is not a regulation, they don't know what to do. They don't know what to follow. We as an authority are probably a little bit more progressive, that we've engaged with it. We've had the opportunity to engage with it. So we're learning, what is it, working with the CAA, working with other partners, working with the industry to say, what is required? When we're talking about allocating that land space for takeoff and landing, where does it need to be? Can we put it in the city? If we are going to put it in the city, how do we engage with the planners? The planners at the moment are the biggest challenges, because they've never thought of this. When we're talking about the benefits of the urban air mobility in delivering parcels, or how we're going to do it in a restricted city, it's very, very difficult. When in islands where you've got a lot of space, or in Texas where you've got a ranch, you can do it. But when you're talking about a city, what do I need to do, or what can I tell other cities that, look, you can start doing this by implementing this regulatory framework, where the framework consists of what you need to do as a city, which will allow you to do. But because, again, we can't fly beyond visual line of sight. We can't fly above certain areas, because the no-fly zones are restricted. What do we need to do? We start repurposing our canals. Do we put the planning application in to say any new housing estate will have a facility for a drone delivery to take place? Because that way, the key targets for us are to try and meet those green agendas that have been set. How do we do that? And how is this, in our opinion, we feel that this particular mode of transport is actually going to make make those life changes. But if we're not able to demonstrate what regulations is, if you're flying with the CAA, if you're flying and using a commercial airline, there is a certain way that you can. There's a certain flight path you have to follow. So those regulations in place. But when you're talking about urban, it becomes a different environment, a different kettle of fish. So what is it that we need? So that's the bit of regulations that we're working on. But what we want to do is, it's only in a draft format, because there is so much more that we need to learn as a city, but we need the industry partners as well as the regulatory operators to turn around and support us in that.
Excellent. And I'm sure, as part of this work, there is a lot of public engagement as well involved. And I wanted to ask this to you, Denise, because I know that as part of the work you've been doing in the Hamburg area, there was a lot of public engagement, I guess, involved in order to develop what you have been developed, right? And I guess same was true for you, but how was that experience for you in Hamburg?
So this year we've gone, I think, a little more into the public engagement side of things, whether that's more media engagement, really being something on the news, having it in print, just really engaging more with the media on this topic to bring, you reach a much broader audience. When we did our drone port opening, the official opening, we invited political stakeholders. We did 2 open days for the public where we advertised it. We sent out, I think, 5,000 flyers for the surrounding citizens that live near the drone port. I mean, it is very much an industrial area, but across the river, there are lots of people living there. So we invited them all to come and see what this is, see what this drone port is. So we did a lot of actual, in-person engagement too, talk to people, had them come, look at the drone port, see the drone flights, get a little more familiar with when they see drones flying that are, orange and white, it means it's the HPA flying. Some of our use cases that we're testing in the project right now, flood control and infrastructure management, those are topics that I think are near and dear to the citizens of Hamburg. We've had some flooding issues in the past, and so something that is a public benefit, a public good, I think is also easier to accept and easier to understand. So we've done some of that. We've also done some questionnaires just to get a baseline vibe in Hamburg. How are people feeling about drones? We just
Can you share some results of that? I'm curious.
Yeah, so we just completed our second round. I'm getting the data on Monday to see if anything changed. We did sort of one general survey in May, and we did a second round now in October to see if anything changed now that we, again, engage a little more with the media or with the public. Has anything changed? Did we move the needle forward? So I should have that data on Monday. I unfortunately don't have it yet. But what we did notice in the first round, it is very use case specific. Why are we flying drones? What people's attitudes were. I think we've sort of had this approach in Hamburg, start small and learn, step by step. We start with small drones. We start with inspection services, maybe graduating to delivery, medical services. Those use cases did very, very well. Anything that sort of helps protect the public, I think those did very well. Air taxis were still, I think people had a little bit of, I think there's maybe perhaps more need for some education, some information, where we're headed in that direction, what the safeguards will be. But yeah, it was very closely tied to, is this a public benefit? Will this help protect?
Excellent. Thank you so much. And for Tom, I wanted to ask you this because you mentioned Dublin already kind of graduating to delivery operations. Right? There is a lot going on there, yeah. And you mentioned that the pressure from those operations on the planning, on the zoning, on all of that is pretty high, right? And the city is having to deal with this pressure. Can you tell us a little bit about how is the planning and zoning policy framework evolving because of the pressure?
Well, no, that's the issue. Is
yeah.
There is no zoning.
Yeah.
Like where Mana and Wing are flying from, it's industrial estates or shopping centres. There's no specific designation for, I'm not even sure what you would call it, drone takeoff or UAV zones. But this is where we are now, that we need to inform our planning regulators to talk to government, to talk to the government agencies who are responsible for national planning, that look, there is a zone. We need to come up with this new zone, and where or how it will be described, as I say, I'm not 100% sure, but I know, I'm sure Bobby could comment more on their operations in the sense that they want to deliver from a centre that they have enough people there or enough companies who want their goods or services delivered. I'm sure, you don't want to fly from a shopping centre where there's multiple restaurants or multiple shops for delivery. Wing, from a medical point of view, they would like to fly from a more factory-based, potentially, that they have a warehouse where they have multiple services or multiple goods that the hospitals or pharmacies will need. And, from a storage point of view, once again, Dublin is quite small, so space is quite limited. So I'm sure all the hospitals, if they had off-site delivery, they'd be thrilled. They could repurpose some of their storage area, for example. If it was off, somewhere outside the motorway, the circular motorway that's around, where obviously land is slightly cheaper, still not cheap. But it just means that they could have a large warehouse, like an Amazon type size warehouse for all medical implements, drugs, and other related services from a medical point of view. But no, going back to the original question, it's not in place at the moment, and that's.
Would you say that is your next hurdle for full implementation? So it's because I'm asking this because, like in the past event, right, in aerial cities, cities were not ready. That was the conclusion of the event. We are not ready yet, and regulation still has to evolve, right? Listening to you, I'm more thinking like, well, I mean, the regulation almost got there because people are now flying, and now the cities are understanding what's going on, but they need to themselves really take an action.
We have to catch up.
Yep.
And, Mana Wing, it's a successful service. But, I don't want to say they're not interested in regulation from a planning point of view.
We'll say it later on. It's going to be coming next.
Sorry. It's up to us from the planning point of view. As I said, I'm sure Man and Wing would be delighted if there was no planning restrictions, but there obviously has to be. But as I say, it's successful. It's not hampering you at the moment, if I'm right in saying. So we now have to catch up from a planning point of view.
Excellent. I wanted you to ask almost the same question to Madrid, in a similar fashion. I mean, you have to align the city planning with the aerial infrastructure, right? That these two things are aligned. We saw it during the keynote. Helicopters flying above building, eVTOLs flying there, and all of that. So, is any of the progress that we are discussing Dublin is starting to make already happening in Madrid? Have you identified the similar challenges there as well? And are you leveraging, for example, the political support that you seem to start to have to actually make those changes? Because I'm sure there is competition, right, in terms of space in planning. I'm sure that the drones delivery is not the only player that wants to have access to that roof or to that. So, what is happening in Madrid in this regard?
Okay. Planning and regulation in urban areas is basically how to share the public goods and spaces. Basically, this is the goal. Air quality, noise, space, physical space. So you have very little space, a lot of people wanted to use the space. So you have to decide how to police the use of this space. That's a very difficult thing. The situation we have now is basically we have to decide what kind of services do we need in the first moment. And we don't know exactly what kind of services we are going to need in the near future. For instance, will we have passenger drones or aero taxis? Will we have delivery drones? Or will we use just for specific transport, such as hospitals, this kind of service? So we have to take a step by step process, and we have to be very careful. From the regulator point of view, the biggest mistake is to pass too much regulation too early. Mm-hmm. We prefer to have less regulation a little bit later. No? To give you a comparison, it's a good model with the mobility, the physical mobility with cars, ordinary traffic. In Spain, we have several regulators as everywhere. Probably we have a national level that gives you the general rules for vehicles. But for cities have specific problems. There are some tensions, sometimes because the problems that the national regulator tries to solve are different from the problems you are trying to solve. And second, there are some holes in the regulation, something that is not regulated. To give you an example, so you can, for instance, when we have to do a project to deploy electric free car floating sharing in Madrid, we have big discussion because you are allowing some private companies to use public space. You have to decide if they have to charge them, how many cars are you allowing in the city. And probably we'll have the same discussion with drones. How many drones should I have in the city? How many space are going to provide them? So it's very important to understand the value that the service provides to all the citizens, to define what's the regulation to promote or to control this. In this case, for instance, we decided to let the electric sharing to park in the street for free, so they pay nothing for the use of the public space, because we wanted to promote free mobility with no emissions mobility. Mm-hmm. So depending on, you have to find a niche in this jungle of people wanting to use the public space, and to find a way to use the public space to provide value. And if you provide value enough for the city, you get your share of the space. So every time I finish a pavement, I have a group of people queuing at the door, asking, I need some for the bikes, part for the motorbikes, I want for the taxi, I want for the bus stop, and I have a line of people asking for space. So probably you will be the next in the line asking for space to do this. So we have to find out, at the end you have a compromise between the cost and benefits, so we have to decide what's the role. So the role depends on the value that you are providing to the city.
Excellent, thank you. And I remind everybody to ask your questions also via Slido. You should have the QR code, and it's there. And you can see the first ones coming up. I wanted to start from the last one there, in terms of, something that Bobby will love, like the tax for takeoff and landing in a city. Because, I mean, people are obviously, I guess, from what you just mentioned, right? You say, like, everybody's competing for space, so maybe you're going to have to pay something to access that space, whether it is a takeoff and landing tax or whatever else. I'm curious, maybe from you, in your regulatory framework, whatever, is this something that has been already considered? Are you thinking about that? Like, okay, we can make money out of this, or at least we can mediate between the conflicting interests using, money as one of the leverage? Or is it not yet the case?
No, but the bigger case is the acceptance at the moment. For people to accept the operations of drones in an urban environment, the moment we mention that you've got to pay for that, then the uptake becomes less. So the idea is, let's get the operationals working, show them the benefits. Once it is operational and the benefits are seen, that there is a cost saving for when you operate a drone or when the service is used. For example, lending that, where are you going to put that space? If that space is underutilized and you are actually using it, for example, if you're giving up a parking space, one parking space to put a vertiport, which will take the deliveries of small parcels, which can then be collected rather than a vehicle dropping it off, maybe we're losing a parking space. That's what you'd charge at. But at the moment, the bigger challenges are, and I'm sure all cities are probably in the same situation as we are, it's the uptake of drones. How do we get that in a daily life, daily operations? Once that is established and once the regulatory framework is in place, what do we need? Because at the moment, do we want to have a vertiport that's going to deliver passengers in the center, or do we want it on the edges and then transport them with a different mode of transport, which is a lot greener? Or do we have it like we did in Coventry, right next to a transport hub? So those sort of things. And then those costs will start becoming natural, because, there is a cost you have to pay. You at the airport, you're paying, and they will come. But at the moment, the buy-in is a bigger challenge.
Okay, so the good news for the drone operators, the manufacturers, is no taxes yet.
At the moment, no.
Okay, that's great. That's good to hear. Excellent. And there is a question about competing priorities, right? Between we heard a few times, and I think, I know what Bob is going to say in the next panel, but I don't want to anticipate that. But the point is, there is always this idea that, like, if you do good, right, you have a priority, whether you compared to you delivering coffee. Many people don't agree with that. Again, I know that. But there is a question about that. Like, is City being challenged with these competing priorities? Do you see this as a problem? Or at the moment, because the uptake is not there yet, it actually doesn't matter and you can accommodate pretty much everybody? Police operations of the city itself, counter UAS is another question. Is there still enough space that this is not a problem? Or do you start to see these competing priorities? Maybe a question for all of the cities. You can start from you, then we
I was going to say, because currently what is happening is the police and the fire and the emergency service work under a different regulatory framework, where as an emergency they can take off and land wherever they want to, because it is for an emergency. But in Coventry, what we've done is we've engaged with the police to say, because I think one of the issues that was raised is, do we want to populate our skies with drones everywhere and congest our skies as we've done our roads? But if we do a collaborative approach to it, work with the emergency services and say, right, okay, you've got a drone, you might have a delivery drone that's taking off, which can carry a survey. So that collaboration in delivering a service using multiple drones or different ways, including collaboration with the emergency services, they can start delivering a lot of the stuff that we need to, rather than congesting our skies. Mm-hmm. And actually, the feedback we're getting and the engagement we're getting with the emergency services, they are quite actively engaging with us. because they want to. They see the benefit in because they're not going to be using their drones 24/7. We could actually then turn and say, well, there's a commercial element to it that rather than us buying additional drones, we can use your drones to do that work for us. So that's where we are.
Thank you. I see one of the questions being more upvoted is about the use of geo-zones, to address, restrictions in cities. And this is kind of a use-spacey question, so I'm going to go to Ireland first because you were mentioning, like, is this something that is happening already? I know that, for example, in Switzerland, this is something that has been happening for a while. Like,
Yes.
how do you impose? But that was on a national level. Is
No,
it a city thing?
it's at city level. At the moment, we're actually organising a workshop internally for Dublin City Council to discuss potential geo-zones within the city. And it's contrasting demands and needs and restrictions. Like, for example, our Parks Department wouldn't want any drones flying over the parks area. They haven't exactly said why. You can understand biodiversity aspects, but we do all our training in one of the parks and we've no issue. So it might be restricting a geo-zone to part of the parks. Once we have agreed that within DCC, Workshop 2 is going to be with other local national bodies within Dublin. Obviously, there's a lot of government offices, the airport, and other commercial bodies who would potentially look for restrictions. Like, I'm sure some of the top hotels don't want drones flying over and back. I'm sure it'd be the same potentially with graveyards or something like that. There's so many different areas and different bodies, but we have to ensure that it can't just be a blanket no-fly zone. It can't, because it's an emerging technology, and everyone will use and everyone will benefit. Primarily, if it is emergency response, health and safety, that's the primary goal, to ensure airspace is clear for that. But we can't have a city that's just completely geo-blocked. That won't work.
Okay. Thank you. And we are a bit running late, but I guess we can continue another one question, and then
Just to give my view on this, from our point of view, emergency service and police will have absolute priority every time when they are dealing regulation. We're having some problem of coordination between different police. I don't know if in your countries you have different police. They have local police and national police that they are flying. Sometimes they are all of them flying the drones in the same area. They are looking themselves, but the drones are not detecting themselves. So there's another question if we are detecting nefarious actors. Or, we had a national regulation that was passed before summer with beacons, obliging to install beacons on drones. So I think could be a very interesting product to check what's going on in the city, but we are not now. We are having preliminary discussions with some providers to find out what's the best way to do this, but not actively monitoring the space. So in any case, probably the emergency services will act the same they do now with the rest of the traffic. When we have an incident, if the importance, the severity of the incident is very high, police takes control, and all of them work with under the command of police. So that would be the same, and sometimes we have street closures or good decide this in any moment the owner of the emergency.
Thank you very much, and I hear and I can see that we need to move on with the other panels, and so I would like to thank you, all of you, for your participation. And also, one remark from my side. I find it very refreshing, this conversation, because again, the conclusion of last year's Aerial Cities was like, well, the cities still need to kind of find their bearings around those drone things. Political support was not there, regulation was not there, drone ports were not established. And it seems like 1 year later, I don't know, for those of you who were with us last year, there is significant progress. I can hear really good technical conversations around subject matter that is important. And this, to me, is a very good sign. So as an opening panel, I am refreshed. I think we will be looking at a great conference with some positive, progress rather than, complaining and moaning about things that not move.
Yes.
So thank you very much, everyone, for this first panel. And I mean, you will be staying for the next one.
Okay.
But thank you very much. Please, a
Thank
round
you.
of applause.